Okay, 2 more episodes to go. It's been a minute. Batwoman was off for a couple of weeks. A couple wonderful, stress-free, glorious weeks. And if you saw the state of me the last time we did this, I think you'll agree I needed the break. And it helped a lot. I feel refreshed, re-energized, and now after having a nice rest, I feel like I can make it through these last 2 episodes, just breeze through these things, and finally close the book on this godforsaken season easy peasy. So, with no further delay, let's watch this episode and get to the review. With how bad the season has been already, it couldn't possibly get any worse at this point, right? Well, that happened. Mother of God. I thought the show was preempted for 2 weeks because of the Olympics. But no. Turns out, it was because the writers needed to cram 3 weeks worth of stupid into 1 episode. I didn't think such a thing was even conceivable, but they found a way. What? What, you don't believe me? Well, buckle up. The episode begins with some of the dumbest shit the show has done all season. The fact that it turns out to be a dream sequence does nothing to quiet my rage, so yeah, it still counts. Alice takes the elevator up to Marcus's office, so needing his fingerprint and retinal scan to access it, that's not a thing anymore. She beats up a bunch of thugs, shoots one of them in the head, redemption arc, what's that? Finds the Joker's joy buzzer, and shocks herself with it. She wakes up later at the illegal underground abortion clinic where she tells Mary that she feels like Beth again. And then 3 weeks later, we're at her parole hearing where a lawyer takes about 30 seconds to explain why Alice's entire character arc for the last 3 seasons has been a giant steaming pile of horse manure, ending with saying that just 1 jolt from the buzzer magically rewired Alice's brain and reactivated the love and empathy which had been turned off this whole time. That would be nonsense even if it was what Alice's problem had been, which it wasn't. Alice still felt love and empathy, unless you're telling us that Alice's feelings for her sister and Mouse and Ocean were all bullshit and didn't count. Is that what you're telling us, writers? I honestly don't know, because the lawyer somehow contradicted herself while telling us all this. First, Alice was crazy because she was kidnapped, traumatized, and hypnotized, and then she was crazy because her love and empathy were turned off. Those are 2 different things! Yeah, so the writers are just living in this delusional fairyland where there's only one kind of crazy, sociopathy is just a big blanket term that encompasses all of it, and the Joker's joy buzzer is a magical on-off switch that turns crazy people sane and sane people crazy. And you can't blame this on the dream sequence because that's basically the canon explanation at this point. The lawyer recommends that all charges against Alice be dropped because after a grand total of 3 weeks, they can no longer deem her clinically insane. 3 whole weeks, huh? That was how long it took to decide definitively that she wasn't responsible for all that pesky mass murdering, so just like that, Alice is a free woman. And again, you can't play the dream sequence card here, because as we'll find out later, this really is how the writers view their characters. That no matter how many unspeakably awful things they do, there doesn't have to be accountability for anyone, unless it's as a form of punishment or even torture, because that just doesn't fit their narrative. The other day, I was watching the Rob Zombie Halloween movie on Netflix. Pretty good movie. The sequels suck, but the first one, not bad. Anyway, there's this really interesting scene at the mental hospital where Dr. Loomis is talking to a 10-year-old Michael Myers. This is after Michael brutally murdered 4 people. And Michael is crying. He's really upset, saying, I don't want to be here anymore. I want to go home. Why can't I just go home? And Dr. Loomis tells him, you can't go home because you've done terrible things. Well, yeah. He killed people, committed crimes, he's obviously very disturbed, he's dangerous, therefore he has to stay in the mental hospital, which he does for many years. Pretty simple, right? Now, why is it that a literal slasher movie villain has more accountability than the characters on this show? If any of you out there are currently not blocked by Caroline Dries on social media, I'd love it if we could get an answer to that one. Alice leaves the courthouse, apologizes to Ryan for using the buzzer on herself when Ryan needed it for Marcus. She offers Ryan the buzzer because it was somehow never confiscated as evidence for some reason, to see if maybe Luke can fix it. Considering all the buzzer does is deliver an electric shock, that's pretty reasonable. But Ryan just assumes the buzzer is dead and walks away. Even in Dreamland, Ryan is a goddamn idiot. Then Alice leaves a flower on Beth Kane's grave where she's greeted by Ocean. You know, that guy she was in love with despite her ability to love being turned off. He says Alice doesn't deserve a happy ending, and then he drops dead again. Alice cries and cries, and then just like that, we're back in the abandoned subway car she likes to hang out in. It was all a dream. She never even had the buzzer. So she's sobbing uncontrollably, yelling at her reflection, "Leave me alone! Get away from me, Alice!" And this was another scene that just made me feel bad for Rachel Scarston. She is trying so goddamn hard to make this work, but the whole scenario is so stupid it's just not possible. On an even semi-competent show, this would be heartbreaking just because of her performance, but it's not. This show wishes it was semi-competent, so all it does is depress me that Rachel's talents are still being wasted on this trash after 3 years! Any other actor in show business would have mentally checked out long ago, but she's still there giving this shit show everything she has. This woman deserves a fucking medal for her professionalism, and the last thing Batwoman deserves is a talent like Rachel Scarston. If it's any consolation, Rachel, you should have no trouble finding a much better gig when this is all over. Cut to Sophie waking up after a long night of you-know-what. I'm so sorry. She wakes up alone, because as soon as Sophie fell asleep after they had sex, Ryan ditched her. I mean, Ryan actually left to do crime-fighting stuff, which is good, but I just find this very funny. So Sophie's in her underwear, because CW. Then Jada walks in to cue the awkward relationship shenanigans, because CW. Cut to the illegal underground abortion clinic where Alice is frantically looking for antipsychotics. Mary walks in on this, and Alice is freaking out. Her hallucinations were gone for a while, but now they're back, and she really needs that joy buzzer, because it's going to be the deus ex machina that flips her switch from evil to good like a talking Krusty doll, and instantly fixes all her problems. But Mary says they need the joy buzzer for Ryan's brother, so Alice says, and you need it for your sister. Mary's response to this is... well, it's something. She bursts into tears and sobs the following. "You're not my sister. A real sister would have stopped me. A real sister would have stopped me before I killed someone." So that's Alice's fault now? Even though she said that searching for poison ivy was a bad idea and they shouldn't do it? Even though she wasn't there at the time of the murder because Mary used her plant powers to put Alice to sleep? Yeah, forget all that. It was Alice's fault now. You took advantage of me. You needed me, so you encouraged me, and now a wife is without her husband, and there are 2 boys without their dad, and their life is ruined, and my life is ruined. There was some truth in there. Some. But that last little bit is what killed it. Your life is ruined, Mary? How? Seriously, how? You said you wanted to take responsibility for what you did, but you haven't. And given the way the episode plays out, it looks like you're not going to. You haven't gone to the authorities to confess. You're certainly not going to prison for murder or getting locked up in Arkham like many other characters on this show have for stuff a lot less serious than what you did. You taking responsibility began and ended with you attending the funeral of the second person you murdered. Not the owner of that insurance company, though. That guy. Otherwise, you're just going about your day like normal. So spare me your self-absorbed, narcissistic word vomit about how you're perfect sitting on a golden pedestal so high you can't see the fucking ground. Life is supposedly ruined, okay? You're doing fine. Taking responsibility. The writers wouldn't know responsibility if it crawled up into their ovaries and laid eggs in there. Quite an about-face from the last time these 2 characters saw each other, isn't it? Holy shit. Thankfully, Alice isn't letting Mary get away with this. Not in this scene, anyway. She says it was Mary's fault, and I'm so sorry you gutted someone with a tree branch. My bad. And yes, that is the actual dialogue. So Mary tells Alice to get out. And if you can believe it, this was Mary's high point of the episode. It gets quite a lot worse after this. Back at the apartment, Sophie doesn't trust Jada, thinks Jada's just using Ryan to protect her from Marcus, and if Jada had just treated Marcus like a criminal in the first place, they wouldn't be in this mess. Funny how Jada gets the blame for that when Ryan made the exact same mistake, and will continue making it in this episode, by the way, and Sophie will have nothing to say about it then. Then Ryan comes in. She was gone for a while because she was busy jumping Marcus's lawyer. In a parking lot. It wasn't in his car, but why these characters aren't all avoiding parking lots like the plague on general principles at this point, I couldn't tell you. She stole the guy's computer, which has Marcus's calendar on it, and for some reason she thinks Marcus will stick to the calendar after she stole it. I don't know. The calendar has nothing on the schedule after today, though, which they think is odd. But Marcus was looking for the address of Jim Gordon's ex-wife, Barbara Keene. They got divorced after their son was found with body parts in his closet. After seeing what Gotham did with the Barbara Keene character, are we sure we can blame that on the son? Just saying. Upon hearing this, Jada quickly leaves, and Sophie goes after her. On the street, Jada's on the phone with someone, saying, if this involves Barbara, it involves all of us. Sophie overhears this and confronts her about it, and Jada's like, how'd you get down here so fast? And Sophie says, it's a lesbian bar. Know your exits. Are they implying that a lot of lesbian on lesbian sexual assault is happening in that bar? Because on this show, I believe it. Sophie thinks Jada's trying to cover her own ass for being a part of a murderous cabal, which Ryan might have an issue with. This is referring to the Black Glove Society, which after ceasing to exist for most of the season, is suddenly a thing again. But not for f***ing long. When Sophie brings this up, Jada hops in a car pretty quickly and nopes out. Then another car pulls up. Sophie instantly deduces that this is actually Jada's car, and that means that Jada has just been kidnapped. Oh no, not Jada. Her and Ryan were just starting to bond. I hope she f***ing dies. Cut to Mary showing up at the house of the guy she killed, the second one, and she tells his widow that she has information about her husband's death. This is not going where you think it is. Cut to the Joker's workshop where we find Kiki. You know, that criminal who escaped Team Batwoman with the Joker's joy buzzer in the last episode? Apparently, Ryan never thought to check the most obvious place she could possibly go. Well, I suppose even someone like Ryan, who knows how criminals think because she spent a lot of time around them, can't think of everything now, can she? Alice is paying her a visit, once again showing that our insane mass murderer is more competent at crime fighting than our heroes. She's momentarily startled when she starts hallucinating that Mouse is there with her. Weren't you just dying to see that wonderful character come back? But she then attacks Kiki, demanding that Kiki make her a new joy buzzer. Some references are made to Harley Quinn and the Joker killing Jason Todd, just so the writers can taunt us with better stories and characters we could be reading about right now. Then Marcus comes a-knockin' and shoots Kiki dead. Thanks for coming, Judy Reyes. I assume this role will be credited to Alan Smithy on IMDb? Yeah. Then Marcus just picks up the joy buzzer, which was in Kiki's pocket the whole time. Well spotted, Alice. Now, Marcus is actually a fan of Alice, but he's not about to just give her the buzzer, so instead, he opens up a canister of laughing gas, sprays it in the air, and they both start laughing uncontrollably. And then Alice passes out from the gas, but not Marcus. Cut to the Bat Gay Bar, where Luke is trying to track the car that took Jada with nothing to go on but make and model. And also taking the time to remark that Sophie's wearing the same clothes as yesterday, and isn't that weird? Ryan deflects. He gets a hit on a car purchased by Wayne Enterprises 2 days ago. And yes, Marcus was indeed stupid enough to use that as his kidnap mobile, so Ryan tells Luke to track the car. How the hell he's supposed to do that, I'm not sure, but it all happens off screen anyway, so it doesn't matter. Then, hold on to your butts for this one, the show actually breaks some revolutionary new ground when Alice wakes up, unrestrained, only to see several other people tied to chairs. I just blew your damn minds, didn't I? Marcus has a bunch of prisoners all covered in black cloaks, and one by one he uncovers them to reveal the members of the Black Glove Society. I have one question. Why are they wearing black cloaks but not black gloves? One of them is Barbara Keene, and the others might have some significance to comic readers, but they're just lining up for the meat grinder in this situation, so it hardly matters. Basically, it's Barbara, Jada, and 3 white men. Can you guess which ones are about to die? Anyway, Marcus recaps how the Black Glove Society was created. Marla Elliott's son Tommy was insane and tried to kill her, and now here we are. He has a spinny wheel thing that looks like a cheap-ass game show prop. Beats me what they're going for here. He spins it, and it lands on gas. So he mentions how Barbara's son was so insane that when he was 15, he tied a dog to the train tracks, and so to save face when she ran for philanthropic chair, she hired a doctor to try to cure her son. Barbara, you monster! But the doctor was off the books, and the drugs were experimental, and they turned the son into a drooling vegetable. So as payback, I suppose, Marcus fits Barbara with a gas mask and pumps every single ingredient of every single medicine she ever gave her son into her lungs. A foamy substance comes out of her mouth, and she dies in seconds. Wink. So Alice is on a balcony right now, just watching all this. Not doing anything about it, just watching. Now, she could be taking this opportunity to try to get the jump on Marcus so she could get the buzzer, but if she did that, then Marcus couldn't kill all the male prisoners, so she doesn't. Then Mouse appears again, and he says Alice doesn't deserve the joy buzzer. You know, because of all the stuff she did. Poisoning him, attaching a rat to him so many bats would drain him of his blood and become poison-injecting bats, which she would then use to try to commit mass murder, just to name a few things. God, this show is stupid. But Alice disagrees. Not about the show being stupid, about her deserving the buzzer. So she tries to fight Mouse, but he disappears again before she can, and then she hears a gunshot. Sadly, the recipient of it was not me. That would have saved me from having to watch the rest of this, so we couldn't have that. Cut back to Mary, God help us, and she's telling the woman that she knows who her husband's killer is. Hey, writers, you know what might make this feel more important? Or make it feel like you gave even one single solitary shit about it? If we knew the husband's name, or the widow's name, or the name of the little kid who was traumatized by watching his father get killed right in front of him. But we don't know any of those things. Because, let's be honest, they don't matter, do they? The victims don't matter, taking responsibility for the harm that was done to them doesn't matter. The only thing that matters is letting Mary off the hook for it as quickly and easily and insultingly as humanly possible. Hence why the woman interrupts Mary before she can say who killed her husband, because she already knows who killed her husband. It was Alice. Turns out a woman claiming to be Alice called the GCPD, confessed to the murder, and I quote, "It adds up." Yeah. Because her husband was impaled with a tree branch 20 feet up in the air in the middle of a forest. That fits the MO of Alice in Wonderland. Forget about the part where poison ivy was known to be at large at the time. This totally tracks, doesn't it? Forget about the fudging of details where the son said his dad was attacked by a blonde woman, even though Mary was clearly a redhead at the time. No discrepancies there whatsoever. It all f***ing adds up. Case closed. You writers. And Mary, realizing that she's about to get off scot-free with having no accountability, taking no responsibility, and not having to confess to being a murderer in any way, shape, or form, admits to the woman, yes, that is, in fact, what she came to tell them. Alice, not Mary, is the one who killed her husband. Mary officially has less accountability than a psychotic mass murderer and a slasher movie villain. Because at the end of the day, Mary saying she would take responsibility for what she did was bullshit. Her sobbing, self-righteous speech about the widow and her kids was bullshit. She didn't care about accepting the consequences of her actions. She didn't care about doing the right thing. The only thing Mary ever cared about was how this all affected her. The instant she saw a way out, the instant she saw a way to not have to own up to what she did, she took it. Mary, this character without lube. You know what? Stuff like this is why I say that if this show has a single redeeming quality in the grand scheme of things, it's Alice. She's as horribly written as anybody else, but in a weird way, she is the most sympathetic person. Because despite being a mass murderer, which the writers try to let her off the hook for too more often than not, she's also a victim. In her lowest moments, she does stuff like this, showing that there are still tiny specks of a good person in there somewhere, whereas Mary shows that she's just a hypocritical, self-absorbed little brat. And Alice also gets screwed over from time to time. Like here, for example, which I think the writers viewed as punishing her, but what they think is a punishment is actually Alice, in her own way, taking responsibility for what she did. Alice did play a part in those events, so she owned up to it, going so far as to confess to a murder she had nothing to do with, while Mary stood by, let her do it, and didn't confess to jack shit. The result being that Alice looks like the sympathetic one, and in the writers' efforts to absolve Mary of any wrongdoing, just like they did with Kate in season 1 after she murdered somebody, all they've really done is make Mary look like a horrible person and a massive bitch. I hate Mary so much, and we're not even done yet, because as unfucking bearable as this was, she still gets worse. Then we cut to Ryan and Sophie in the Batmobile talking about what else? Ryan apologizes for deflecting when Luke asked about Sophie's clothes, and Sophie's annoyed that Ryan is hiding their relationship. That silly business of the murdering sociopath is the furthest thing from their minds until Luke calls to tell them that he found the guy. Cut back to Marcus killing all the male prisoners. Jada's the only one left now, and his idea is to freeze her like she was going to do to him. But before that, he's going to use the joy buzzer on her because for some reason he thinks that she'll still be conscious when she's a block of ice, so his plan is to make her think crazy thoughts while she's cryogenically frozen. Alright. But Alice stops him from using the buzzer. So they fight, and Marcus actually beats her very easily, because she might be the woman, but if she wins the fight, then the rest of the story can't happen, so the writers were kinda between a rock and a hard place here. Marcus doesn't do anything though, because he wants him and Alice to rule Gotham together. And then he reveals that on that fateful day on the school bus where the Joker buzzed him and gave birth to Black Joker, that was actually the bus that ran Beth Kane's car off the bridge, which makes it fate because they were both born on the same day. It's meant to be the big twist, but really, it's not that surprising. The second we found out that the Joker buzzed Marcus on a school bus, I figured they were gonna do this at some point. I guess the writers feel like they're tying everything together somehow to make it feel all momentous and shit, but it's just desperate, laughably predictable, and ultimately means nothing. So now that Marcus has made his big pitch, he tries to buzz Jada again, but Alice stops him by offering him something that would make the Joker wish he were Marcus. But Marcus is on the CW's Batwoman and the Joker is not, so I doubt that very much. Cut to Alice escaping with the buzzer when she's confronted by Sophie. They fight, and despite Sophie having a gun, Alice defeats her in seconds. Now Alice is about to finally buzz herself, but Batwing stops her. Then Sophie subdues Alice while Alice sobs, "Please don't make me go back there, don't make me go back to Arkham." And here's a question. Why is she going back to Arkham? Before this mess started, Alice had an official legal arrangement signed off on by the mayor, wherein she would help Montoya track down those missing weapons and thus earn her freedom, which Team Batwoman seemed okay with at the time, and just last episode, they didn't give a rat's ass about Alice potentially skipping town. It's not like they were looking for her to bring her in again. Mary even packed her a bag. But now, after Alice just helped them out by stopping Marcus from turning Ryan's mom into a sociopath, now they're just gonna change their minds and send her back to Arkham? Why? Because nothing f***ing matters, continuity is a joke, and it's once again time for Alice to get screwed over, because when the writers have a double standard this f***ing big, somebody has to. And God knows it's not gonna be any of the non-white characters, now is it? Jesus Christ. Then we're back with the prisoners. Batwoman finally shows up. Marcus is gone at the moment, so she unties Jada and tells her to run. Then she takes the gas mask off of Barbara, and Barbara just wakes up. She's not dead or a drooling vegetable like her son after all. She just spits out that very deadly looking foam, and she's perfectly fine now. Off. Then, Marcus sneak attacks Ryan and calls her a coward for hiding her face. Otherwise, everyone would know that she's just a punk-ass street rat whose mommy didn't want her. So, get this, Ryan takes the mask off. Barbara Keene knows your secret identity now. Well done. Dumbass! Ryan admits that when she first learned about Marcus, she was jealous of him because he had everything and grew up believing that he could be anyone and do anything, but then she realized that she had something he didn't have. Hope. And I know the feeling. Every day that goes by with news of a Season 4 renewal nowhere in sight, I too have hope. It's the only thing that sustains me at this point. But Marcus says he does have hope. He's got hope coming out of his ears. And then he empties his gun into Ryan's chest. There's a message hidden in there somewhere. Now she's wearing the bat suit, so she's totally fine. But this does knock her down for a minute. For some reason. We've seen Batwoman shrug off gunshots without even feeling them plenty of times before, but now they're enough to put her on the ground, almost as if Marcus's gun was firing trumpets or something. The less you think about it, the better. And speaking of not thinking about shit, Marcus is about to freeze Ryan, but Jada grabs a gun, shoots the freeze canister out of his hand, and then lets him run away like a jackass while she drops the gun and checks on Ryan. Ryan is, of course, perfectly fine, and she also does nothing to stop Marcus from escaping because Ryan getting a hug from her mommy is more important than capturing the murdering sociopath. So, they've got the buzzer back, and they plan to use it on Marcus. They could have already done that if they hadn't let him escape, but I digress. Then Ryan and Sophie talk about their relationship some more, because that's what this episode was desperately missing. Sophie says that she's never been in an out relationship with a girl, so Julia and the several girlfriends you said you had at the start of the season don't count. Just checking. So what if she finally got the courage to be out, but the person she's interested in doesn't want the same thing? What a travesty that would be! And Ryan admits that she was hiding. Not from Luke, but from herself. Because every time she gets something good, she loses it. It's almost word for word what Alice said about Ryan in an earlier episode, so they just hit copy-paste, and here it is again. Sophie says that won't happen this time. There's some awkward relationship stuff about how Ryan meeting Sophie's mom won't be as bad as when Sophie had to meet Ryan's mom. LOL. They start kissing, but they're cock-blocked when stupid Luke comes in to update them about boring, stupid crime-fighting stuff. Thanks, Luke. See, while Ryan and Sophie were busy with the much more important business of being lesbians, Luke was busy searching for the murdering sociopath who escaped because Ryan couldn't be bothered to stop him. Why the f*** isn't this show about Luke? Unfortunately, Luke wasn't able to find Marcus, because Marcus was hiding in his office at the company where he works. We're almost done. We're almost done. And then, Mary suggests that maybe it's time they call the police, but Ryan is against this because she isn't going to let Marcus rot in Arkham for the rest of his life. What? Shit! No! 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 What the? Ah! Number 1. Marcus just kidnapped and murdered several more people. Should he not be held responsible for that? Number 2. He very nearly turned your own mother into a sociopath and a human popsicle. Should he not be held responsible for that either? Number 3. At the start of the episode, Sophie was calling out Jada for not treating Marcus like a criminal for all the evil shit he's done just because he's family. But now, when Ryan does this, she's totally cool with it all of a sudden? Number 4. Why does Marcus get to stay out of Arkham despite being a murderer while Alice is getting thrown back in Arkham for the same f***ing reason? Alice is the one who, in her own twisted way, has been showing redeemable qualities and that she at least wants to change, but she goes back to Arkham while Marcus gets to walk. Good for thee, but not for me. Alice gets punished, or tortured as it were, and Marcus has a free pass because him and Ryan got crapped out of the same vajayjay once upon a time. And also because he's black, which I'm sure had nothing to do with it whatsoever, right, writers? The writers have to know what a baffling double standard this is. And I'm sure they do. The fact that they don't care and keep getting away with it regardless is the really infuriating bit. So Ryan asks them to give her 24 hours. If she can't find Marcus within 24 hours, then they can take it out of her hands. Whatever the hell that means. Just imagine how many more people Marcus could murder in the next 24 hours. God damn it, it's like Kate and Alice from season 1 all over again. He keeps killing people, and she keeps refusing to bring him to justice for it just because he's family. It's the exact same f***ing thing! Meanwhile, I'm wondering why the hell Barbara Keene isn't calling the cops about this. You've got several murder victims, an eyewitness, and probably DNA evidence lying around here. Why is Marcus not being arrested? Then, like Luke did earlier, Mary also notices that Sophie is wearing the same clothes as yesterday. She puts 2 and 2 together, and I swear to everything holy in this universe, her reaction to finding out that Ryan and Sophie are DTS is the most cringy, horrifying, nauseating thing I have seen in any media. To say that she's cartoonishly giddy would be an understatement. she starts fangirling on a level that... Oh, shit. Words don't do it justice, okay? You have to see this to believe it. But for the love of God, watch it on an empty stomach. Thank fuck the episode's almost over. Not a second too soon. Anyway, after Mary's made me void the entire contents of my stomach, her and Luke take off so Ryan and Sophie can be alone. Then we cut to a mortified, horrified, sobbing Alice being dragged back into her cell at Arkham. Yeah, that'll teach her for not being related to Ryan. She hallucinates Mouse and Ocean again, who say they'll be there every second of every day to remind her of what she did to them. Meanwhile, Mary gets to forget all about the people she murdered. Alice is just at her wit's end at this point. She's begging them to leave her alone. She hides in the corner like a scared little kid. Then, suddenly, the hallucinations are gone, and Mary's there. Jesus fucking Christ, hasn't Alice suffered enough already? Just for a second here, I thought Mary came to give Alice the joy buzzer, but she didn't, obviously, because fuck Alice. Turns out, Mary just came to say thank you. She doesn't feel enough appreciation to help Alice, or to even honor the deal that Alice made with Montoya, because that would be like work or something. She just wanted to thank her because what Alice did was above and beyond what anyone's ever done for me. Above and beyond what anyone's ever... You know, Mary, various members of Team Batwoman have literally saved your life on several occasions, but Alice taking responsibility for your actions so you don't have to trumps all of that? Do the writers really think that death is preferable to being responsible? Because that would explain a lot. I could see this becoming the show's official mantra, actually. With great responsibility comes suicide, so we don't have to deal with it. Suck it, Spider-Man. So Alice says that she's really, really sorry. Mary asks what she did, and the episode ends with Marcus entering the Batcave. Alice told Marcus how to access the Batcave, and it was really easy because his office literally has more security measures than the Batcave does. See, to enter Marcus's office, you need his fingerprints and retinal scans, unless you're entering through the roof, in which case, it. But to enter the Batcave, you don't need squat, because there's just one episode left, and why would the writers start giving a rat's ass at this point? Shit on my life, this was fucking excruciating. The writers are hell-bent on ending this season in the most agonizing way possible, aren't they? Well, mission accomplished, assholes. I hate everything with the fury of 1,000 exploding suns. Mary is the most loathsome piece of filth on television since the last time Kate Kane was a thing. The only person being held accountable for their actions is the psychotic mass murderer, while all the non-white killers have get-out-of-jail-free cards because the writers just pick and choose who the law applies to and who it doesn't. There's double standards all over the goddamn place, and the part that chills me down to the very pit of my soul, I think the writers are saving the worst for last. One more episode to go. One more, and then this hellish nightmare called Batwoman Season 3 is finally over. Maybe the writers will finally do me in, maybe I'll take them to hell with me, but either way, in 1 week's time, this shit ends. Peace. Out.